Conversation around suicide may involve such topics as trauma, child abuse, sexual abuse, and death by suicide. Viewer discretion is advised.
So I would like to introduce to all of you our first panelist. Just so you know, we talk a lot about predictability, safety, and control. And one of those markers for predictability is to explain to you how your evening will go with us tonight. We have 4 panelists who will be joining us. The first one is Dr. Sally Spencer-Thomas. She will be followed by Craig Miller and then Isabel Garcia. We will wrap up with our panelists with Larry Berkowitz, and then we will have a Q&A. So without any more delay, I would like to introduce to you one of my mentors and very dear friends, Dr. Sally Spencer-Thomas. Dr. Sally Spencer-Thomas is a clinical psychologist, inspirational international speaker, and an impact entrepreneur. She currently serves as the executive secretary for the American Association of Suicidology and is the president of United Survivors International. With that, Sally, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Next slide, please. Albert Einstein failed his freshman entrance exam. What if that huge disappointment led him to think about suicide instead of going on to make his discoveries? Marie Curie, some of you might remember her from your high school chemistry class. She's best known for discovering the element of radium. But what many people don't know about her is that when she was a young person, her mother died, and it threw her into such despondency that she was hospitalized for depression. What if that overwhelming loss had led her to take her life instead of going on to win 2 Nobel Prizes in science? We're learning more and more about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s experiences with suicidal intensity. And what if those led him to take his life instead of being such a big part of the momentum behind the civil rights movement? And even William Shakespeare, right? To be or not to be. Many people don't know what his young adulthood crisis was, but he and his girlfriend found themselves unexpectedly pregnant. And what if that life transition led him to consider suicide instead of going on to write his masterpieces? Now, this campaign was called Don't Erase Your Future. And it was about everyday people, men and women just like you, who sat around a table and said, we must change the conversation we're having about suicide. Many of you have lived experiences with suicide, loss survivors, attempt survivors, thought survivors, and supports. And for those of you who are here as loss survivors, I'm with you. This is my brother, Carson. He was a 34-year-old business leader, father of 2, and he is the reason I do what I do. He happened to fight bipolar disorder for much of his young adulthood life, which proved to be fatal at the age of 34. He is the inspiration that gets me up every day to do this work. Next slide. This is a slide that really helps us understand the context of why we're having this conversation today. When I first started doing this work, suicide was the 3rd or 4th leading cause of death for our youngest people, our teens and our young adults. And over the years, over the last 15 years that I've been working, this has creeped up. So now it's the 2nd leading cause of death for our kids, our teenagers and our young adults and our young parents. So we absolutely need to be mindful of this huge tragedy among our youth. And again, I'm so grateful that you're here. Next slide. I wanted to give you some hope. While everybody's very concerned and there's good reason to be, there's also plenty of reasons to be hopeful. These are 2 evidence-based youth suicide prevention programs that I just wanted to highlight for you. One is called Sources of Strength. It really helps empower youth leaders to champion their strengths and their relationships and as a group within their school. And the other is called Directing Change, and it really empowers teens to use their creativity and their technology skills to create a 30-second PSA, a public service announcement, that's messaged in their voice about what matters to them in terms of suicide prevention and mental health promotion. And the reason I love these 2 programs, and they can come to your schools, so that's why I wanted to put them up here, is that they really focus on, both of them focus on a couple of things. They position youth as empowered experts and leaders directing this work in their own communities. Because I don't know if all of you remember what it's like to be a teen and how much you wanted to listen to caring adults telling you what to do. It doesn't always go over so well. But empowered and instructed and lifted up students can do amazing work. It also really emphasizes their creativity, and it's a project-based learning. Both of these are. So they learn and even engage in some friendly competition that expands their expertise and their advocacy voice. So if you don't have these at your school, I really would encourage you to look into them. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. We're also very interested and concerned about certain subpopulations of young people. And this graph really highlights for us the number of concerning things that are happening to our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth. As you can see, lots of violence, lots of discrimination, bullying, assault, etc., leading our LGBTQ plus teens to feel excluded and afraid of rejection. Just advance it just a little bit. So really, it's not all about just getting troubled young people to counselors. One of the other really important things we need to do to prevent suicide is address, could you just advance it one more click? There we go. Is to address some of the environmental determinants for despair. So in this case, as well as for our young Black students and Hispanic students and Indigenous students, there's a lot of young people experiencing minority stress or unrepresented population stress or discrimination or trauma that's driving their despair. It's not all about depression and anxiety. Sometimes it's the environment that's the problem. Next slide. So one of our other hopeful things is there's been a real strong emphasis on making our schools and our neighborhoods and our communities safer for students who identify as LGBTQ+, and the number of resources coming out there to really focus on doing that environmental work. Next slide. Next slide. Click again. Another thing that you can bring to your school or your community is these documentaries. They are both conversation starters that can get young people talking in community and processing some of the things that they're experiencing. The one on the left is called Suicide: The Ripple Effect. It features someone called Kevin Hines, who's a suicide attempt survivor, who talks about the impact that suicide has on its communities, but more importantly, it talks about the impact of spreading hope. And he talks about growing through and really engaging a global community in the advocacy for suicide prevention after his attempt. The other one, we have one of the stars on our call tonight, Craig Miller, is featured in The S Word. And what I love about this video is it really followed for a number of years, a number of people who had been impacted by suicide, both as suicide attempt survivors as well as loss survivors, and chronicled their journeys, their trials and tribulations in recovery. So both of these documentaries really put a positive frame, opening the conversation to the opportunity for resilience and recovery, peer support, and growing through difficult times in our life. Next slide. Another thing, I'm going to be all action oriented today because that's what we heard you wanted when we asked you what you wanted. This is something you can do with your young people, or actually all of us can do it as an exercise in engaging ourselves in our reasons for living. What we do is we actually just get a box, and in the box we put all the reminders of the things that at one point or currently bring us joy, or a vision or a purpose. So it could be pictures of your family, your pets, food you love, music, scripture, visions you have for your future, whether that's a degree or a career or a trip or a mission that you have. This helps when we are feeling hopeless. It helps us get out of that tunnel vision, and again, awakens that hope in you, awakens that reason to stay. You can also write a letter to your future self that you would read. If you felt like you might slip back into suicidal thoughts, you can say, dear self, I know you're having a hard day today. This is what I want to remind you of, why it's important to stay. Next slide. Another really important thing that all of us should be doing is building out your A team. So again, you can do this right now. You can pull out a piece of paper and just write down the 3 to 10 names of people that you want in your boat. Like, you want to be rowing with these people when you hit the whitewaters rapids. Who are the people that you trust? Who are the people that bring out the best in you? And here's a good question to ask yourself. Who would drive across town or answer your call in the middle of the night, even if it really inconvenienced them? those are the people that you want on your A team. And I'm going to tell you how to cultivate that in just a second. If you can't think of anybody, that's a really important thing to know. And I'm going to ask just another question. Was there ever a time that you had people on your A team? Maybe it was a few years ago in a different part of your life. Maybe there was a mentor or an aunt or a friend that if you maybe track them down, they would be so honored to be on your A team. All right, so next slide talks about once you've got your A team figured out, what are you going to do to make sure that they come by your side? And so we do some things called prepping your A team. Next slide. So if you've got someone who's having a really hard time, it's really important for their A team to know that they're on the A team and say, you know, I need you to come support me during this time. Sometimes it helps to have a code word, right? So if I text you the word gorilla, I really need you to call me back or come on over, take me out for coffee or take. The A team doesn't have to do anything magical. The most important thing the A team needs to do is show up. Just show up. You don't have to say anything magical. In fact, just sitting in silence together could be a really powerful thing to do. Learning those listening skills where you can listen deeply with curiosity and wonder and really ask the other person, tell me what it's like to be you. And just hold that space with them is a really important thing to do. Now, if the person that you're trying to help has got suicide on the menu, it's very important to also know what the crisis resources are. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or the crisis text line, or if you already have a therapist, so that if the person on the A team gets stuck, they can say, you know what, right now I need help helping you. So how about we call the Lifeline or chat with the crisis text line together? Really frame this as a positive partnership. And then the last thing on this slide that I want to share with you is this thing called non-demand caring contacts. And I actually want you to do it right now. So everybody pull out your phone. I'm going to teach you how to do this. There's actually quite a bit of research behind this very simple thing that we can do for one another that makes us not only just feel good day to day, but can really help people feel like they matter and that they're seen when they're in crisis. All right, so I want you to pull up your phone. I'm going to have you text somebody. So you're going to pick somebody. Maybe there's someone from your A team. Maybe there's someone you haven't connected with a while that's on your heart, just someone in your life that you're thinking about. A non-demand caring contact is kind of what it sounds like. Non-demand, you don't ask like, hey, how are you? Or did you do the thing? You don't ask any kind of questions where they have to respond to you or answer a question for you. You just send one little sentence that expresses that you care about them. Hey, you're on my mind, or I was thinking about you today, or just wanted to let you know you're special to me. Or you can reinforce their resilience. You can say something like, I see how strong you are, something like that. Now, everybody send your non-demand caring contact to your person. And first of all, I want you to just notice yourself how you feel about doing that, and then see what you get back. If you get back a message that says, hey, are you okay? That tells me that you don't actually do this very often. And so maybe do it more often because it feels really good to both parties. But mostly often people come back and they say, you know what, I love you too. Or I care about you as well. Or, oh, shucks. And so it kind of strengthens that connection. Just do it randomly. Do it randomly throughout your A team. Next slide. Another important thing to know about is, click one more time, are these mobile safety plans. This is really important. This is free, downloadable from the App Store. Everybody can use it, and you can put your crisis response plan in here. So things you can think about, like, what are my triggers? What are the things that kind of get me upset? Or what are the different life circumstances that happen where I start to feel overwhelmed? Or what are some of my early warning signs when my behavior changes that I know I'm probably not in a good place? For me, I can tell you when my sleep gets super disrupted, then I know like my mental health is not fully in the place it needs to be. What are your coping strategies? What helps you calm down? What helps you self-soothe? How do you distract yourself? What are the things that get your brain off that broken record of hopelessness or self-harm thoughts? And then there you go. You put it in your A team right there in the app. So their faces just pop up to you when you open the app and you're reminded like there's people out there that care about me. And then right there, you hit the green button and you can get connected to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I have a whole bunch of other apps on my website that you can also look at as things that can help you cope. Next slide. And then I just wanted to touch a little bit on children and suicide grief. We know that many, many people are impacted by suicide loss. people as friends, as family members. And it's really hard sometimes to talk to kids about it. My kids were 6, 4, and 3 months old when I learned about my brother's suicide as we were driving to a party. So from the very, very young ages, they were part of this conversation about, they witnessed me in the moment that I learned about my brother's death in a very acute grief situation. And they just kind of grew up in our house where this was just something that our family was dealing with and trying to cope with. So I know it's very complicated for families. We were really unsure what to do. No one ever told us how to handle this unforeseen tragedy. But I've learned a lot of things since. And one of the things that's really important is that we be honest with kids, that we don't make up lies or really large euphemisms like they're at peace or something like that. You only need to give them kind of what they're asking about, small chunks at their developmental level. So while I didn't hide anything from my children when they were super young, they went on walks with me, they heard me talk, they didn't put it all together until much later. I remember I was like getting ready for work. It's a Monday morning. It's all hectic. 3 kids trying to get packed to their lunches and stuff. I'm in the bathroom doing my hair, and Nicholas comes in with Tanner in tow. They're like 10 and 7. And Nicholas likes, Mama, I know how Uncle Carson died. He died by suicide. We were learning about suicide in school. Van Gogh died by suicide and Uncle Carson died by suicide. And I said, yeah, that's right. Everybody sit down on the floor. So we did, crisscross applesauce down on the floor, and we talked about it. And they didn't really have any more questions than that, honestly. They just wanted confirmation. And so then I just pivoted to, if you or anyone else you know of is struggling with this, you got to come to me right away because we got to get them some help. These are some of my favorite resources around children and grief and suicide grief in particular. The Dougie Center is a great resource. They have this pamphlet that also helps walk through how do we talk to teens about this. The After a Suicide workbook for grieving kids is amazing. It's all kinds of nonverbal ways like drawings and other types of story prompts that kids can engage with to kind of express their grief a little bit indirectly. And then Sesame Street has a wonderful series of grief support videos that, again, can help prompt conversation, and you can give them that little window where it's okay. It's okay to be feeling what you're feeling. I also have a blog about that if you want more information. Next slide. And that's what I have. So I'll turn it over to Craig.
If you or a loved one are struggling with thoughts of suicide, these helplines are available toll-free.